We welcome our remote worshipers and we thank you for being with us online today as we get into the Word of God. We are in our sermon series entitled Leading the Way. Leading the Way. Our sermon series follows our one-year Bible reading. So we are in the Old Testament passages of the assigned reading for the week. It is a sermon series about leadership because as Christians, we are all leaders. We're called to make disciples, and that's a call to leadership. As I was enjoying some of the throwback music this morning from Newsboys, I thought about back in the day, and it took me a little beyond 30 years, a little beyond 40 years, to my high school days. And how many of you took English literature in high school? Is there one? Okay, maybe 10. How many of you recall having to read some Shakespeare? Okay, all right. Required reading, otherwise you would have never read it. Shakespeare makes the King James Version of the Bible sound easy to read, doesn't it? And I did not enjoy it. I confess I did not enjoy it. It was not fun. It was long-winded sentences made Paul sound brief. But our teacher was cool enough. He actually showed the play, Hamlet. And there's a scene in Hamlet, I think it's in the second act or the third act, where Queen Gertrude? Let me double check. Yeah, Queen Gertrude is watching a play, and the actress in the play who is playing the queen is protesting that she, about if her husband died, she'd never remarried, and she overplays the role. And in that scene, the Queen Gertrude, is quoted as saying, "The lady doth protest too much, methinks." Remember that line or something close to that? And we use it to speak of overplaying or overacting to the level of insincerity, because in the play she does remarry after her husband dies. And this week, as I read the story of Elijah, I found myself protesting too much, methinks. I invite you to explore the story with me. It begins right after one of the greatest biblical events. Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh, had a divine smackdown at the top of Mount Carmel. The kingdom of Israel had strayed from worshiping their God, and they practiced worshiping other deities. They worshiped Baal, the god of weather, setting up for him a temple in Samaria. They worshiped the fertility goddess Asherah. Figure agrarian societies could easily want to favor the god of weather and the god of fertility. Those two powers could, if you believed in them, make a difference in an agrarian situation where you want things to grow. But for 3 years, after Elijah made a pronouncement, drought covered the land, shutting down the god of weather and rendering the fertility goddess infertile. He summoned the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah to Mount Carmel for the battle of the gods. Well, the 450 prophets of Baal showed up, but the prophets of Asherah never made it to the great event. And Elijah does things, or he did things that great children's stories are made of. He tells the people, decide which God you're going to serve. Now let's do a test. Let's see which God is the real God. He sets up the challenge, and they bring 2 bulls, and he says, let's slaughter the bulls and put them on the altar. And whoever's God sends down fire, that is the real God. Most of us know the story. The prophets of Baal go ahead first, and they spend all day, and they slaughter their bull, and they set up their altar, and they're chanting, and they're murmuring, and they're calling, and they're pleading, and they're petitioning their God. And around noonday, Elijah starts mocking them and tells them to try harder. Your God might be taking a nap. It could be siesta time. You gotta go louder. And they do what they do. They start cutting themselves. The blood is flowing, and nothing is happening. Finally, it's Elijah's turn at bat. He sets up 12 stones. He lays the bull, tells them, dig a trench around it. Bring some water, pour water on it. No, pour more water. No, even more water. Soak it. You would think he was pouring gasoline on the thing, but it was water. Soak it. So much so that the trench was full with water. The text says, then the fire of Yahweh fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. Have you seen stones burn other than coal? Have you seen stones burn? This is impressive. I would have liked to have been there. You know, I can envision fire coming down from heaven. I would tend to call that lightning, right? A lightning strikes, boom, and everything's burnt up. But wait. There is not a cloud in the sky. It's a drought. That's pretty fascinating. Something we all wish we could see. The text says, now when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and they said, Yahweh, he is God. Yahweh, he is God. And Elijah said, seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let them escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and executed them there. Boom. Case closed. Story ended. Team Yahweh wins. All Israel worships Yahweh, right? I wish. This is where my protest begins. Because you look at 1 Kings 19, the first 3 verses, and it says, there we go. And it says, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he ran for his life and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. I'm like, no. This is not the way the story's supposed to go. That's not how it's supposed. Who wrote this script? Elijah had just won the ultimate contest. He turned Israel back to Yahweh. Rain had not fallen upon the land. Rain had now fallen upon the land for the first time in 3 years. Elijah was at the apex of his ministry and power. And the text says, and when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. What kind of powerful prophetic behavior is that? No one had done what Elijah had done. No one had achieved what Elijah had achieved. No one had made as bold a statement and taken as clear action as Elijah had on Mount Carmel. But suddenly he was running for his life. The first man the Bible records as resurrecting the dead is now running for his life. And he was running fast, and he was running far. Google tells me that it's 188 kilometers, or 120 miles, between Jezreel, where Elijah was, and Beersheba, where he ended up on the first leg. That is from here to Sweetgrass, a.k.a. the Canadian border. All right? He left, well, you can imagine he probably ran the first mile, but after some point, he's walking the rest of the way. unless he went down the Nile and took a boat down. But he traveled 128 miles. He got out of town. He literally, if you were here, you could say he got out of the country. But that wasn't far enough. After leaving his servant there, he goes another day's journey, approximately 20 miles if you're not in the desert. It's less if you are. But he leaves his servant, goes another day's journey before embarking on another 40-day walk. This one is in the desert. This is another 267 miles. What is this man running from? He goes to Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai, where God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. Technically, that's still Egypt, way down at the bottom of the peninsula. I intended to show you a map and forgot to stick it in the PowerPoint. But just imagine at the bottom of the Persian Gulf there where the Red Sea splits in two. He goes all the way down there. In total, over 400 miles. What kind of fear is that? All of this because a woman got upset? That doesn't make sense. How can a man who faced off 450 false prophets be afraid of one queen? How can someone who had been so bold with the king be so cowardly with his wife? How can a prophet of God who could hold back rain just by pronouncing it be so afraid of Jezebel's word? I suppose some of you are thinking some of the words of William Congreve in his 1697 play, The Morning Bride. You may not recall the play, but I'm sure you remember the words, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." But no, Elijah's action don't tell us as much about Jezebel as it does Elijah. Let's look more closely. Verse 3, and when he saw that, he rose and ran for his life. My question is, what did he see? Several translations, by the way, don't say he saw that. They simply say, and he was afraid and got up and ran for his life. But as I go and look back at the Hebrew, the text there suggests he saw something. The word there is ra'ah, meaning something appeared or behold or consider or discern or gaze or look or perceive something. The Hebrew implies that Elijah had a realization of danger. He saw danger. He had a sense of danger. So why didn't he have a sense of danger before Ahab, when Ahab was trying to find him during the 3 years of drought? Clearly, Obadiah had a sense of danger. You remember Obadiah, Ahab's servant? In chapter 18, verses 9 through 12, Elijah tells Obadiah, go tell the king I'm here. I want to meet him. And Obadiah says to Elijah, take a look at verse 9. Take a look at verse 9. Obadiah says to Elijah, so he said, how have I sinned that you are delivering your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As Yahweh, your God, lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to hunt for you. And when they said he is not here, he took an oath from the kingdom or nation that they could not find you. And now you say, go tell your master Elijah is here. And it shall come to pass as soon as I'm gone from you that the Spirit of Yahweh will carry you to a place I don't know. So when I go and tell Ahab he cannot find you, he will kill me. Obadiah had a sense of danger. Why didn't Elijah sense danger when Ahab referred to him as the troubler of Israel? Why didn't he sense the danger of being outnumbered 450 to 1? Yes, I doth protest too much, methinks, because I expect more from a prophet of God. We expect more from someone who has had experience both with the presence and the power of God. We want to see more courage. We want to see more faith. We want to see more boldness from one who has been inspired to believe in Yahweh, inspired us to believe in Yahweh again. But he ran. He ran for his life. He ran when he saw it. He ran when he sensed the danger. Why? Why, Elijah, do you let us down? Why the cowardice? Why do you break the no chickens allowed rule? Perhaps my protest comes from my own sense of failures. Perhaps my visceral reaction comes from my tacit understanding. Maybe we can all see ourselves in Elijah at this moment in life. How often do you see great failures following great successes? Look around enough and we see poor choices trailing great accomplishments. Even among the godly, we see mistakes after miracles. I protest too much, methinks, because in my heart I agree with James 5:17, which says Elijah was a man with a nature like ours. Why do we fail after succeeding? My friends, I believe that at times God's people experience faith fatigue. God's people experience faith fatigue. My friends, faith can wear you down. Even the best of us can wear down in ministry. Ministry can be exhausting. Fatigue happens. Elijah was tired, and fatigue affects judgment. Fatigue comes in many forms. There is physical fatigue. Our bodies get tired. And that's why when Jesus was in the garden with his disciples the night before his crucifixion, his disciples kept falling asleep. They were fatigued. And what did Jesus say? The spirit is what? Willing, but the flesh is weak. We get tired. There is mental fatigue. Have you ever taken an intensive course in high school or college, one of those one-semester classes squeezed into 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and it tends to be overwhelming. Take one of those doctoral classes, by the end of the 2 weeks, you're like, no, you can't even read the alphabet anymore. You forget the letters. I mean, it's just too much. Too much. We get spiritual fatigue. That's why Paul, as he writes to the church in Galatia, he says, let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap a harvest. We shall reap if we do not lose heart. I propose to you there's also faith fatigue. Now, you've probably heard me say half a dozen times, faith and fear are the same thing. You've heard me say that, right? Faith and fear are the exact same thing, right? Because why? Why are they the same thing? They both, come on, work with me. They both start with F. Good job. They both believe what you cannot see will happen to you. Now you remember it, right? Yeah, that's the thing, yeah. They both believe what you cannot see will happen to you. So they're essentially the same thing. One is a positive belief, one is a negative belief. My friends, living in what is to come takes energy, and it's stressful, especially when what is to come does not match up with what is. What's the biblical definition of faith? Faith is
the assurance of things unseen.
Okay, the substance of things hoped for, the assurance of things unseen. Right? The evidence, if you use the New King James. Based on that definition, based on the Bible definition, it seems to me that faith might not be admissible in court. Think about it. What substantive proof do you have? According to the text, hope. Faith is the substance, faith is the substance of things hoped for. So what's the substance? What concrete do you have? Hope. I'm not sure that it's going to hold up in court. What evidence do you have? Things unseen. No, that does not cut muster in court. I can't imagine that would work out. Faith fatigue is what happens when we get tired of hoping and waiting for things to change, and they don't. We hold on to hope, but things don't change. And do that long enough, and we experience faith fatigue. Elijah had expected change. Elijah had expected revival. Elijah had expected conversions. Elijah had expected peace. And when another threat came, his faith was fatigued, and he ran for his life. I propose to you, my friends, that this matters because fatigue in one area of life affects other areas of life as well. Be careful what choices you make while you're under the influence of fatigue. It's real. Those choices may be no better than the ones you would make under the influence of alcohol or some hallucinogenic. Fatigue while driving may be as dangerous as drunk driving. Fatigue on the job can be extremely costly. When I worked construction, I realized that after about 8 or 9 hours, I was making more mistakes on the job than I was making progress on the job. Cuts would be off by half an inch, or I would invert my numbers. And I'm supposed to cut what? 123 inches long or 69 inches, and I would cut 90, whatever. Things would get messed up, and I would have to redo stuff. After a while, it just made sense to pack it up and go home. Medical profession still has an ongoing debate about the 36-hour shift of medical interns. Physical fatigue impacts our judgment. Mental fatigue impacts our learning. Emotional fatigue impacts our demeanor. Spiritual fatigue impacts our behavior. Faith fatigue impacts all of the above. How do you know you're experiencing fatigue? Well, physical fatigue is easy to recognize. We're tired. We are tired. We have a hard time staying awake. That's a sign. But other fatigues are a little more challenging. But one way to tell that we are experiencing fatigue is, well, when we do stupid stuff. That's a sign. I mean, we just make bad choices. Consider this. We're 19:3. When he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. That's what the text tells us, right? He arose and ran for his life. What did he run for? He ran for his life. So what was he trying to preserve? His life. Go down to verse 3. Okay, we're going to read that again, and we're going to go to verse 4. When he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. He went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. And keep reading with me. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. And said, "It is enough. Now, Yahweh, take my life, for I'm no better than my fathers." Help me out. What was the purpose of running for your life if you're going to ask God to kill you? How much sense does that make? Can you agree that's a sign of fatigue? You can make a claim for depression as well. That doesn't make sense. That's what fatigue does to us. And you can probably make a strong correlation between fatigue and depression. That's why Jesus prayed for Peter in particular and his specifically faith. What did Jesus say when he said Satan has wanted to sift you? He says, "But I have prayed," verse 32 of Luke 22, "I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren." Because he knows that our faith can become fatigued. That begs today's challenge, and that is this. How do we manage fatigue in our lives? How do we manage that? How do we live knowing that we can experience fatigue? By the way, folks, everybody experiences fatigue. We don't have an option to not be fatigued. It happens. Just stay awake, even if you don't move. Just stay awake long enough. After about, who knows, 16, 18, 20 hours, 24 hours, you're going to be fatigued if you do nothing. And here's the irony. The less you do physically is the more easily you become fatigued. All right? You know, the person who does a lot of physical labor has more endurance than the person who doesn't. So not doing anything is not the solution to being fatigued. So how do we manage this? Well, number one, I think we need to practice self-care. Self-care is important. Now, as Christians, we talk about, giving our lives for Christ and not serving self and dying to self and living for Christ. That's all appropriate. But until you're called to do specifically that, you need to be fit for that. And that calls for self-care. Let's take a look at verse 5. We're still in chapter 19, 1 Kings. It says, then he lay down and fell asleep under a broom tree. This is after he had run the second set of miles. He lay down, fell asleep under a broom tree, and behold, there was an angel touching him, and he said to him, arise, eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a round loaf of bread baked on hot coals and a pitcher of water. So he ate and drank and lay down. But the angel of Yahweh came back a second time and touched him and said, arise, eat, because the journey is too long for you. So he arose and ate and drank, and he journeyed in the strength. I'm sorry, I put it in the wrong place. It's between trips. He journeyed in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. Self-care. That was pretty powerful food, by the way. I'm impressed. You know that was super high carbohydrates right there, right? You can run on that, or run and walk on that for 40 days. It's like, oh man. My friend, God had to provide self-care for Elijah because he was fatigued. Elijah drove himself too much and too long and needed some rest. Jesus modeled self-care for us in his instructions to his disciples, Mark chapter 6, verse 31. He said to them, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while, for there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. Self-care matters, my friends. We need to practice it. We need to manage ourselves. We need rest. We need nutrition. We need relaxation. We need friendships. We need time out now and then to get our behaviors right. Right, teachers? Sometimes time out helps. I suspect most of you, if you've been an Adventist more than a year or so, you may remember the 8 laws of health that the Adventist Church promote. What's the acronym for that? New Start. See, I got a few old timers in here. Yeah, New Start, and it stands for nutrition. E for exercise. W for water. S for sunshine. T for temperance. A for air, preferably fresh air. Yeah. What's the second T for? I'm sorry, R. Thank you. I'm glad you're better at spelling than I am. The R is for rest. And the last T for trust in God, trust in divine power. My friends, if we're experiencing fatigue, we probably are out of balance with one or more of those 8 laws of health. Maybe we're working too much. Maybe we're pushing too much. Self-care is important. We need to practice it. But that's not the only thing. I see in God's word instruction to get back into the moment. We need to get back into the moment. What moment? The present. As humans, we live in 3 times and 2 dimensions, or 2 phases. We live in 3 times. What times do we live in? Past, present, and future. Yes, somebody went to English class, right? We literally live in the past. If we forgot everything from the past, how meaningful would the present be? Not very, because we'd be learning everything over. The difference between humans and other animals is our ability to hold on to the past, because that allows for cumulative learning, right? It's also our ability to live in the future. We call that imagination, right? We can step into the future and see things that are not. And we can decide to create those things. Everything that has ever been made, automobile, buildings, your clothing, whatever, anything made, manufacture, was once imagination. How many of you have flown on a plane? All right? That was once imagination. It was said it could never be done. All right? We drive in automobiles. That was once imagination. This building, every building, your house, was once somebody's imagination. So we live in the past, the present, and the future, but we also live in two spheres of that. And one is the positive. How do you see the past? Is it positive or negative? We got choices. How do we see? How do we see the present? Positive or negative? We have choices. How do we see the future? Positive or negative? If we see it positively, we see it in terms of faith. We see it in terms of hope. We see it in terms of aspirations. If we see it negative, it's called fear, dread, anxiety. So when we experience fear, we're living in the future. Right? If the thing we fear was in the present, we would not be experiencing fear, we'd be experiencing pain. Right? So if fear is acting, we're in the future. You got that? Well, if you're afraid of anything, it's a future thing. Because if it's in the past, you're not afraid of it anymore. It's a memory. We need to get back into the moment. Because a lot of us are spending a lot of our time in the future. We're planning, we're anticipating, we're dreading. We're spending so much time in the future that we're sacrificing today for something that hasn't happened yet. And planning is important. I mean, we got here because we planned, right? Or because somebody planned. We go to school because we're anticipating the future, right? We prepare, we get a job skill, we go to training because we're anticipating the future. That's important. Like I said, that's what separates us from the other animals. But we can't live there all the time. You want to manage fatigue? You need to come back into the present. Need to be in the present. Living outside of the present is tiring. It wears on us. And we need to step back into the moment. Take a look at what happened here in the text. God called Elijah back into the present. Look with me, verses 9. Begin at verse 9. And there he went into the cave and spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of Yahweh came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So he said, "I've been very zealous, for Yahweh, God of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life." So then he said, "Go out, stand on the mountain before Yahweh." And behold, Yahweh passed by, and a great strong wind tore the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before Yahweh. But Yahweh was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but Yahweh was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but Yahweh was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went down and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" In other words, snap out of it. What are you doing here in the present? And he said, "I've been very zealous for Yahweh, God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life." While Elijah sounds as if he's having a meltdown, God is calling him back to the present. What are you doing here? Let's focus on the right here, right now. What are you doing here? It also implies that God is saying, I never told you to come out here. What are you doing out here? Oh, what if we could just practice staying where God put us? How would our lives be instead of running all the time? It's not always where we want to be, but it's where God wants us to be. There's a story, we covered it a few weeks ago in 1 Samuel, when the first time Saul tries to kill Samuel, and Micah has to hide him and, put stuff in his bed and make it look like David's sleeping. Meanwhile, David's gone. And after that, David goes to Naioth of Ramah, where Samuel is, and he stays there. And somebody tells Saul that David is in Ramah. So Saul sends some messengers to go get David. And as they get there, they start to prophesy. A Spirit of God falls on them. And next thing you know, they're having praise and worship. They went to get David and arrest him. But now they're prophesying. They're having praise and worship. So Saul decides, let me send a second batch of messengers. He sends a second batch. And they're having praise and worship. And they never bring back David. Finally, Saul, who's pretty much, you could almost say he's demon-possessed. Bible, some versions say an evil spirit from God falls on him. But he's possessed with something. And Saul goes himself. And what happens to Saul? He starts to prophesy. He himself goes to try to get David. He can't touch David. Now he's prophesying. Sadly, after that, David left there. And I wonder why. Maybe he got faith fatigued also. Maybe he got tired of living on the edge of faith where he doesn't know what's going to happen, so he chooses to leave there. I propose to you that David's life would have been better. David would have been more safe staying there with Samuel until God told him to leave. But instead, he left. Same thing Elijah did. Elijah would have been more safe in Jezreel, right next to Queen Jezebel, than he had taken that multiple 100-mile trip into the wilderness. Stay where God puts you. That's where he wants you. Stay where God puts you. That's where he needs you. Stay where God puts you. That's where you're going to see him. Don't run. Stay where God puts you. Instead of living in and acting on our future fears, we need to be in the moment that God has called us to. How, you say? Well, here's a quick and easy way to get back into the present. Take a breath. Take a really deep breath. Feel the air coming into your nostrils. Feel the air filling up your lungs. Just remember that you are here right now. And then right here, right now, realize what God is doing for you. But let's go back. Let's go back to our text for our last application. Beginning of verse 15. God just spoke to Elijah, and he continues and finishes saying this. Yahweh said to him, go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. In other words, the way you came, go on back. And when you arrive, anoint Hazael as king of Syria. Also you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king of Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah, you shall anoint as prophet in your place. It shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill. And whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. Yet, notwithstanding everything you have said to me, I have reserved 7,000 in Israel whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. A lot of lessons could be extracted from this passage. We could write 5 more sermons just from that passage, but I wish to extract this lesson. Let God own the outcome. Let God own the outcome. God called Elijah to go back on task, saying, I'll take care of the outcome. By the way, I know what's going on. You're not the only person that I have in Israel. You're not the only one faithful to me. There are 7,000 others besides you. You just do what I tell you to do. I'll take care of the outcome. My friends, God knows the game. God knows the score. God owns the outcome. We don't have to stress about the outcome. We don't have to worry about how things will turn out. It's not our game. It's not our mission. It's not our legacy. It's all His. And that's good news for us today, isn't it? The good news is God will handle the outcomes all by Himself. Do we have choices? Yes, we do. Do we get to participate? Yes, we do. Are we allowed to contribute? Yes, we are. But the outcome is God's. It's not ours. Just as we see in Revelation chapter 5, a scene in heaven, and the Lamb is found worthy to open the scroll. And verse 8 says, "Now when He had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, 'You are worthy to take the scroll and to open the seals, for you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nations, and have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on the earth.'" My friends, though we get to participate, it's God that makes things happen. It's His blood, it's His sacrifice, it's His doing that we are saved. Let's let Him do His thing. In consoling or in consolation of my protests, it's good to see that Elijah figured it out. Jezebel's threat was not the last threat Elijah had on his life. After her death, her son Ahaziah reigned in Israel. He was evil, so he only lasted a couple of years. He fell through a lattice, injured himself, and he sent his messengers to the prophets of Beelzebub. To see if he'd get better, and Elijah intercepted the prophet, said, "Go back, tell Ahaziah he's not going to get better, he's going to die." So they go back and they tell the king, and the king says, "Well, who told you that?" And they describe it. He says, "Oh, that's Elijah, the Tishbite." So he sends a captain of 50 men with the 50 men. He says, "Go bring me Elijah." So the captain shows up to Elijah. Mind you, Jezebel sent a threat with one messenger, and Elijah ran 600 miles. But now, here comes a captain with 50 men, say to Elijah, "Man of God, come down with us now." Elijah's not running. Elijah's cool. In my mind, I see Elijah looking this way, looking that way. "Oh, man of God, if I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you." Poof, they're all gone. King wasn't happy enough. "Let's try this again." Sends another 50 men. "Man of God, come down." "Okay, if I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven." Poof, they're gone too. The third captain figured out what was going on. So he comes and he kneels with his face to the ground, and he begs for his life, and God tells Elijah, "Go with him." First time he ran. Second time, he held his ground. He stayed where God put him. God said, "Go back with him." And he gave the message to Ahaziah in his face, no fear, because he learned his lesson. My friends, we don't have to be heroic. We don't need to be impressive. We just need to be faithful. We don't need to perform miracles. We don't need to stand out. We just need to be faithful. We don't need to have all the answers. We don't need to solve all mysteries. We just need to be faithful. We don't even have to know what we're doing. We don't have to know how to do it. We just need to be faithful. So let's be faithful.